hello. This is our last workshop of the fall and winter, I guess, 2023. We'll be doing the instructor competition starting in February and March next year, spring 2024. So excited to have y'all there. This will hopefully give you the most dialed in, I guess, approach or understanding of each of the US and IR systems so that you can, as the instructor, really navigate and customize where you need. Keep this in mind. You don't need to do this. You can use support. You can really step back and allow the students to just do what they need to do. But if you are someone who likes to make sure there's a little bit of control and that you want to know a little bit more about what's happening in the sim, this might be helpful to you. So now we're going to jump into the international relations simulation and walk through those instructor controls. And there's a lot more customability in the IR sim than there is the US Gov sim. So feel free to pause it when you need to, but I do want to remind you, you don't need to do any of these instructor controls. You can just let the sim run if you want to. But if you want to do some more, this is going to be how you do it. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Boom, boom, boom. Here we go. So we're going to start by signing into the instructor dashboard. So if you have that, you want to walk along with me, feel free to do so. Here is my instructor dashboard. You'll notice my active sims here at the top, my completed sims at the bottom, other potential sims that I could sign up to use, and then other ones at the top that I have already signed up and either used previously or invested more time in researching. Down at the bottom here are the instructor materials. We mentioned this in the past couple workshops, but I think it's also really paramount to mention it again. This is your foundation to understanding how the sim works if you really want to. So check out that instructor manual in here. Look through those materials, the grading awards assignment, tips and tricks, grading recommendations, how to get started. These are all things you can do before you even create your simulation that would be really helpful to understanding the whole context of the sim. A bunch of different options down here, again, making it easier for you to implement the sim as well as understand how it works throughout that turn-based process. So we're going to jump into the testing fall simulation demo. All right, so the first thing you see is the world. Got a bunch of options here at the top. We get a nice little alert message sometimes. We are in turn 12 in this sim, and I can add more turns if I want. In fact, I added this one recently. So there's a bunch of stuff on the map that you can see. You can click on those things. But under instructor controls, we're going to talk about the help options and then the map options. Help, it's right here in the corner, top menu bar. There are a lot of different things that you can look into. You can also search them up at the top here. Feel free to click on those and dive in. How do students sign up? You know, how do I make changes to the turn schedule? There might be some videos in some of them, and there might be some written descriptions or even a slide deck to click through to see how it all works. This is a great place for you when you do have a question about something to come to first. Just because there's a lot of stuff in here doesn't mean that it's everything or exactly how you need to be communicated with. So feel free to write our help team an email, and it's down here at the bottom left, as you can see. So that's help, really great for you to use. What's going on with the map? This is a really, I don't want to keep saying important because it's more than just important. It is the sim. This is how you see what's going on. This is how students see what's going on. And so there's a few ways to investigate this map to start. We're going to look over here. There's 3 different tab options on the left side. We're going to start by hovering over that first one. We can toggle on country names, city names, and even those country attributes. So if I want to see just those attributes to see which countries are a specific type, green militaristic, industrial pacifist, what are their government types? I can toggle that on as well. Constitutional monarchy, a democracy, military dictatorship, communist totalitarian. We can also see anything about those ambassador CIA airports. Now, there haven't been any exchanges in this world, but that's okay. Lastly, this is really great for those human geography and geography courses, is to understand the geographical resources throughout the map as it just stands here. So you can see this. Doesn't mean that students can, but you can start to see how and where these resources provide countries with a competitive advantage. So a lot of these countries may have food, steel, oil, gold, oil, or all resources. Reading the manual will help students understand that if they take this over, it actually is not the best thing for a collective world goal, but it could be really great for their competitive goals. Seeing those geographical resources can be very helpful. We're looking at the zone or the country borders with all these colors here. As you've noticed, green, pink, purple, dark purple, blue, so on and so forth. We can toggle that from country to zones, so states or provinces. And when you do that, it's a little bit easier to see how specific zones might get attacked in a militaristic way. Specifically, these armies have attacked this area, and this area has now become part of this country. So if you click on a zone, it will tell you a little bit of the information about that zone. Knowing how much base production of resources is really helpful, specifically because certain countries may not have those resources, which is why they might be attacking. You can also see if they're producing any other resources based on structures or terrorists or pirates in those areas. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but giving zones, that is a potential option that you can do as an instructor, and that's part of those levers that you control behind the scenes. There's a lot that can happen on that map. Armies and planes and submarines can be moved around. You can take over zones and cities and take all the technologies from those cities. You might put a blockade in around a country so that you protect yourself. There's a lot of different ways that the map function is really helpful. And the way to see that over a time period is to use that toggle option in the middle here. So I can click between turn 2 and turn 4 and highlight specific countries. And I can see how they're investing their resources in either, down here at the bottom with our legend, a developed, balanced, or security-focused effort. Now, I haven't made a lot of turns. This is a test sim, and you'll notice that when I click on that, they haven't purchased anything. But these lines also show, back down to the legend, combat, nuclear attacks, treaties, light versus dark, more treaties, less treaties, missions, and trades. So this is a light green line. This is a one trade. They weren't trading multiple times, but you'll notice that Grasgrener traded Twiddledon 500 food for 200 scientific knowledge. Was that a fair trade? Maybe. That's just something for you to be aware of. You can see that on the map. And sometimes what teachers like to do is at the end of the simulation during the debrief, they take pictures of each of those turns as a way to say, this is what happened. What you weren't seeing up front on your maps, I could see behind the scenes. What's great about that is that you can really understand from a visual perspective. You can really understand from a visual perspective how these countries are interacting. Doesn't mean you're going to get everything, but you're going to get some of it. Then a quick glance here at that last one, you'll see which countries are diplomatically engaged, which ones are at war, which ones are global rivals, and which ones are pretty solid trade partners. It will show their specific flags for that, so you can always pair those up with the flags that are located in the cities. And so you can start to see some of those good solid connections throughout the map there. I hope that helps in understanding a little bit more about the map. So from there, let's jump into the next one, which are the country options. And so I'll go through all these country options on that instructor dashboard as well. Country options is located here on the top of the menu bar. It's on the far left, and you'll notice there's country reports, an interaction log, and then each of the countries on the map. So we'll start with country reports. This is the country by country drill down of what they're doing and how they're interacting in the sim, what they get from each other. And it's just a good way to understand a little bit better about what's going on. So if I click on, let's say, Grasgruner in turn 3, and then that view button, I'll be able to see, if I click on it, their resource production, how it changed positive and negative. I can check in on their political capital. Well, 0 right now. They're not doing too good. How about their approval ratings within their country? No, if it's not opening up, that means that there's no approval ratings. How about programs enacted? Nothing. Military units purchased, trades accepted, their overall quality of life seems pretty appalling for most of them, but the environment at least has 21. So not much going on in that turn for Grasgruner. Let's see if anything happened in turn 11 for them. Oh, they purchased a bunch of military units. So how about combat? Oh, there was combat. That's important. So these are ones I can drill down. Now that's a lot of potential work to go into each of those. So a better way to do this from a macro perspective is starting with that interaction log. That interaction log gives you all of those filtered options: diplomacy, war, trade, and you can click on those all here and a specific turn that they happen. So all the countries during turn 3, I want to see what's happening. Maybe let's start actually with Grasgruner. Nothing's happening at that point in time. How about turn 4? Nothing's really. Oh, there was a pirate attack. Grasgruner lost food and lost oil. How about all countries? If I scroll down again, we got more of those countries that have lost those. So if I was really interested to learn more about those pirate attacks in Domalicia, I could go back into those country reports at that point in time. Or if I just wanted to look at pirates only, that's what I would look at during turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, and so on and so forth. So I can really start to see the actual actions taking place to countries, by countries, and the longer term storyline that the students are creating in the map. Now, with that said, you have a lot of levers you can pull. So let's click on a country here. Settings, indicators, zones, cities, structures, technologies, and the students in those. You can edit all of this stuff. So as a starting point, under settings, this is their specific president, government type, and attributes. If you wanted to change their president, maybe because a student has been absent for a long time or switched schools or classes, you could do that. If you wanted to change their government type, now that would really throw things for a loop. Same with their attributes. You have the control. If you wanted to change their country name, you could do that too. Those exist here for you to change if you want to. Be careful though. Changing strengths in countries is intended for building custom simulations. So doing it in the middle of a simulation could be a bit intense and really throw your students for a loop. I will keep that as a consistent piece throughout this entire presentation. That being said, another thing that you can do, we're going to jump back into that Domalicia indicators. These are essentially the students' resources and ratings and approval. So if you think that some student country is misbehaving, or you want to reward them, or you think that a trade may not have gone through, but it really did, you can always check here and then give more. So if you want to add 500 gold to that, so that would be 3,390. Math fun. You do that and then you click submit, giving them that extra 500 of gold. Now that could come from an outside test or quiz that you said, if you do this in time, you get 500 gold for your country. That's up to you. There's red up here at the top for you to read, keeping in mind that it does change the balance of the simulation, but it also changes the incentives and how students can achieve those incentives. They can change their domestic ratings. You can, as the instructor, and so on and so forth throughout here by clicking submit at the bottom. The last few things under countries are zones, cities, structures. You can give away zones to countries if you think they should have them. If you want to perform an act of God, you can look up a zone also on the map and say, I think that this red country here should also own this zone. So I would trade that by giving it to Twiddleton, and then that zone would be moved to their name. The other few pieces under the country names are cities. You can give cities away as well. Those are marked by a specific red dot for a capital and green dots for other cities in that specific country. If students take over other zones that have a city in them, those cities now become part of those countries. So that is a way to balance the sim, is by influencing those cities. The next one is structures. There's a lot of different structures that students can invest in. You can filter it all up here. So let's say a defense system. Once you do that, you'll see what that country specifically has already. Domalicia has these defense systems in these specific cities. And then you can give them another specific defense system in a specific city and saying 1 or 2. There are multiple structures that you can invest in to change that up for them. Now, this is turn 12. You could do this in turn 1 and start a whole custom simulation, basically, that has some students starting out with a lot more than others, or a lot different structures than others. So you're essentially creating your own sim when you do that. Other options here include technologies. Students are researching technologies throughout the sim so that they can then build better domestic projects or programs and structures, invest in big projects, and potentially use them to trade. So here's a way to see filtering by whatever type of technology you want to give them, and then one specific under that category. Again, you can put it on hold, or you can tell them that it's already acquired and put it in there. These are incentives that you could use from other assignments coming back to the sim itself. Last one here is students. If you want to change up which students are in a specific country, again, we're here in Domalicia. These are the 2 students in those. If one student is missing for a long time or changes schools or classes or whatnot, you can take them out of that country. You could also add a couple students into that country and change them mid-sim. Again, that's your design of the simulation, but it is a lot, and it can be very jarring when students know the strategies of what's going on in those other sims. When you're done with that, click submit. So that should give you the country tab overall. I know there's a lot of information in there, and I hope that that helps you in understanding how you can influence all those countries. The next section we're going to dive into are the student options. So I'm going to click on students up here, or hover on students at the top. You'll see student list. Here's where you can see those student names, emails, and all those students are made up. I made them all up. So you'll see what country they're a part of. You can edit their assignment to those countries within this option as well. You can view their messages, remove them from the sim, and also view their participation. Now, this view participation part is also acknowledged by these colors on the left side. If they've logged in relatively recently, if within the past few days, you're going to see a green bar. So I can click on view participation. I'll see when they started. Click on the last one to see they logged in 12/12/5/32. They logged out at that point in time. So we can see how long they were in there, and how frequently they are invested in the sim. Frank Dellin over here, on the other hand, hasn't logged in since September 29th. So that's a really great way for you to check in with students to see how they're doing. You could also log into a student's world. So if I do that, I'm clicking Leah Bastion over here, I can see and kind of walk through what her screen looks like, so that I know where she might be at and what she might be investing in. I can go through and see what her current treaties are and military units. I can really act as though I'm her without taking any actions. That is something that is prohibited by instructors in the IR simulation. But you can see what's going on in that student's world. Another option here is a pending assignment. So at the beginning, when students register, they take a foreign policy attitude test, and then before the sim starts, they get thrown into this area. You can assign them a country, or you don't even have to let them take that foreign policy. You can do it all on your own. This is where you'd have that control over putting them in specific countries. So if I wanted to, I'd click assign a country, and then I'd say, I want to put her in, and that you're going to Grasgooner, submit that one. Now, just because the foreign policy attitude test takes students and puts them in their own countries based on their hawkish or dovish tendencies, doesn't mean that you can't see it before the simulation starts. So if you want to, you can come in here before turn 0 begins and submit it to see that grouping. And then if you do want to change things, it gives you ahead of time that option to look into changing those. Some teachers want to do that if they really want a lot of control, if they want specifics to be together, specific students to be together, but that rarely happens. Back over here in students is the student memos. There's two places to find these. Student memos are really helpful for you to understand the reflection pieces of how students are connecting the sim to real life, to the classroom, to their emotions, to whatever else you're prompting them on for that memo. So you can go by country, by student, and if they don't have any, they're not going to show up there. So that's okay. We haven't submitted any in this test. You will see that list of students come up and their memos to read through if you want to. Sometimes teachers do this as a participation grade. All right, so that's the student option. We've gone through that. Now we're going to go through the turns option. This is a turn-based simulation, meaning that students must make decisions between a specific time frame in order for those decisions to take an effect. At the end of that time frame, those students' decisions, combined with all the other students in the simulation, go into our algorithm, and the simulation spits out new information. This is why each simulation is so unique, because there's so many decisions being made. So under turns, you'll see two options, turn schedule and create turn. Turn schedule is a great place to start to say, you created your sim, here are those turns that you created. If you need to edit those turns because an unexpected closure for weather, or you're extending a turn because you think students might need a little bit more time, you can work in here and make that happen. If you need us to help with that on the support side, feel free to let us know, and we're happy to do that for you too. Now, if you get to the end of your turns, and this is important, do students know it's the end? If you've told them, then they will know, which means they might make some rash decisions, as if the world is ending, because they already know. This is why we always recommend shadow of the future. Don't tell them when the last turn will be. And in fact, if they think they know, maybe add another turn in, which is what I did in this last one. Adding a last turn, so that throws them off their strategic game. That is so important because it really brings in and roots this in that realistic perspective. If you do want to create that last turn, go under create turn and just make sure that that start date lines up with the last day, the end date of the last turn that you had before. So those are the turns that you can use, those options there. News and messages, we're going to talk about a couple pieces here. If you click on that news and message list, you can see a lot of what's going on and when and where those messages will come out. So I can read through a bunch of that stuff. There's a lot in there. If you want to read through it, you can. It doesn't mean that every single message will be popping up at some point, but you can always change when they do pop up and if they're active and whether or not they should be sent to students. You can change some of that information if you want as well. Or you can change the message altogether so that it's a completely new message. But rather than changing what's already in the sim, you might want to send a message from something or someone that you've created yourself. Now, students won't know the difference, and I'll show you how that happens. So rather than going into the news here, I go over to messages, and I click simulation messages. Under simulation messages, what you'll see are the messages that have been sent out in the sim. Go ahead and come up here to where that compose button is. When you click that, now you can send a message out to specific countries, all of them that you want, or all of those countries. You can have this written from anybody you want. As you see here, some examples: Tornado Man, Gold Thief, Oil Bandits. So we're going to say Tornado Man, and then we're going to say, I have caused serious destruction. I blew in last night at around 2 a.m. and wreaked you. It's up to you to rebuild. Now, I can send this out, forward it out to those students, but that's not backed up with anything just yet. If I want to really make sure that this took an effect, I want to go through all the countries that it had an effect on. Is it realistic for it to hit every single country? Probably not. So instead of all countries, let's just do Oopsathal. I'm going to send that just to Oopsathal. I'm going to come back over to my countries, look up Oopsathal. I'm going to go under their indicators. And if anything were to happen in terms of a tornado coming in, wreaking havoc to this specific country, what might it affect most? Well, it might affect oil diggers, so I might drop that 2,000. It might affect the food, so I might drop that a lot more. Maybe it affects some steel production, but there's not a lot of steel production already, so maybe not that as much. But then it might affect some political capital because we weren't prepared for it. So I'm going to drop my this group's political capital. So when they come into the simulation next, they're going to realize that all of those specific resources are dropped, and they're going to look at their mail and they're going to say, oh my gosh, we got hit by a tornado. Now, they don't know that it was you or the simulation that did it. They think it's part of the simulation. So again, a major lever that you have control over as the instructor. You can send out news articles, potentially ones that are misleading, to give them something to grab onto and say, this is something that I read. It's got to be true. Well, how do you know it's true? A lot of options that you can do under messages that really influence the sim too. All right, so that's news and messages. The next one we're going to go over is the documents. So you can hover over documents here at the top, drop down and see the list of documents that are in the sim already. It's the appendix and the strategic tips and manual. If you want to, you can always upload another document if there's something that you've created that you want to add in there. If you want to add a document that gives a unique advantage to a specific team that finds it, that wasn't looking for it, there's a lot of things that you can do to add in something in that nature that you might want them to be able to review. Under course materials, we don't have any, so that's where your documents would show up if you've added those. So that's documents. The next one here are test banks. So we'll look under test banks. There's 3 options here: quiz lists, creating a quiz, a resource quiz, and creating a grading quiz. So under that quiz list, you'll see all of the quizzes that are outstanding. You can look at those quizzes and see the correct answers for them. And you don't need to assign them specifically. They're already in the student's world. So if you want to, you can say, if you take these quizzes, I'll give you extra points. So the way that they will do that is by logging in. I'm going to show you what a student sees. We're going to go over here to quizzes. We're going to go to grading quizzes. And then we're going to just jump into the just war theory. So I can take this quiz here. And then when I submit it, I get that grade on the other end. I will do this as a test for now. So I'll submit that. I responded 1 question correctly out of those 5 questions. Now, I don't know which one I responded to. So under the Instructor Dashboard, under test banks, quiz list, I can go back in here, find that just war theory, and then send out the correct answers. So that now Leah Bastian can look at those correct answers and see where they didn't line up. Creating a resource quiz. This is a really cool and unique option. You might be talking about something in class that you want students to grasp so well, but it's potentially not landing well. Well, incentivize them by creating a quiz and then putting it in the sim. What this will do is when you ask that question, how long will Twinkies last if they survive a nuclear explosion? Whatever those answers are, 100 years, 500 years, or forever. If forever is that right answer, you want to make it correct, you can give them a specific amount of resources or a political capital for that answer. And this automatically goes into that country. So for this one, Twinkies are food. It lines up with food. Sure, let's make that the connection point. Let's say we have 5 students in each of those countries and they all get it right. What's the max that I'd be really willing to give a country if they all got this specific question right? Maybe 100. So let's give it 20 food, 5 into that 100. So if they look for that quiz, I'm going to say this quiz is called Twinkie quiz. Save that question. And then I'm going to say submit the quiz. Oh, I haven't described it. Nuclear fallout. Here we go. Submit quiz. So now it's been created. Now let's see if it's in Leah Bastian's quiz list. So under quizzes again, click on quizzes, drops down. Resource quizzes should show up here. Twinkie quiz, nuclear fallout. I click on the details. Let's look at her food. She's at 12.25. And I said forever was correct. Submit. Cool, 1 out of 1 correct. 20 points. That's awesome. Now, it may not show up this specific turn. Let's refresh the page and see what happens. There we go, 32.5. So it automatically does it right there. So if all of her classmates do that, then they have 100 more food, or all of her, sorry, her country people do that, then they have 100 more food to be able to use. So that's a way to, again, incentivize those students based on what you're doing in class. The last thing here is a grading quiz. Same thing, but you can take it for a grade that goes towards the end points in the simulation. So you have those accessible. My biggest recommendation for this is create your quizzes in a document, a Google Doc, however you do it outside. So you have it all saved and then copy and paste over so that you've done all of your edits somewhere else. Because if you happen to refresh this page and not saved, then it's all lost. So I highly, highly, highly recommend starting another page and come into it. All right, so that's the test banks. Let's look into Gradebook. So there's a lot of ways that you can grade the simulation. We've gone over that in multiple workshops before this. This is where you can see and change students' points at the end of the simulation. I don't have any points right now. So when the simulation ends, you can go in here and edit those however you see fit based on potentially secret goals that you've given each country or whatnot. So that can be really helpful. You can see their student memos. Again, here, you can see each of the quizzes that they've taken here per student. So per those students, you know, this person hasn't taken any of those quizzes, but you can go through and see all of those. Peer evaluations, if you want them to take this at the end of the sim, can be really helpful in determining whether students were free writing or not. And making sure that this is part of their grade at the beginning, knowing that ahead of time, is really helpful in giving them expectations and accountability. So having this in there could be great for you. The last bit here is the gradebook report. Since the sim hasn't finished, it hasn't produced anything yet, and it'll show up in a chart showing all of the awards for the sim, as well as any quizzes that they've taken and peer evals. All right, with that being said, that's Gradebook. And the last piece here is the custom name. So it may not seem completely apparent, but I think that it is a little bit apparent that you can create whatever simulation you want in this. This is a sim builder, essentially. If you really want to sit down and spend some time, when you build it out, it's all automated, which means that your students making decisions are all in the system, that you don't have to pull the levers and everything behind the scenes later. A way to do that might be to customize the names of everything, or at least some of the pieces of the sim, whether it's those attributes being industrial, green, militaristic, pacifist, and scientific, if you want to change those, or the domestic factions, domestic ratings, government types, and so on and so forth. You have complete access over that custom ability. Do you want to do that every time? It's up to you, but you have it there if you want it or need it. A last way that you as an instructor can really understand what's going on in the sim and support students who might need more support, but potentially also reward students who've done really well, is this email that comes at the end of each turn, essentially. So it'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the sim, tell you a little bit more about the technologies researched, any trades or military issues, and then specifically the participants. And so it'll talk about how many emails they've opened and pages read. The reason why this is helpful is because there's so much information in those emails, those news messages, the mailbox itself. So if students are just letting it sit, they're actually really not gaining a lot of information to make the best decisions they can. Now, that could be that they've never opened theirs and they've looked at their partners the whole time. So this could be an instance where you can say like, hey, I really would be curious as to what you've learned. And if they can talk to what they've learned, then great. But this is a way to at least see it. Maybe these students do need a little bit of extra help. So hopefully that helps clear that up for you. All right. That's a lot of information. You might have already been brainstorming ways to really utilize these controls in a way to incentivize, engage your students, connect with your class better, and then maybe for you to have some fun. But I want you to think about that. Take some time, brainstorm some ways that you can utilize these controls, maybe some that stood out to you more than others, and find something that's going to be exciting. With that being said, here's some next steps. Set up your simulation. Go to our website and set that up. IR. Here, I'll just pull it up real quick. Might be easier that way. Dun, dun, dun. ir.statecraftsim.com. You go to that professor account, and then you say not registered yet, right there at the bottom. So once you have that all up and running, then you're in. Then you can start to access all of this good information right here at the bottom, on the sides. That's up for you, up for the taking. Join our subreddit. Hop over to that subreddit because there's a lot of good information in there, and some teachers have started posting stuff. So feel free to post some of the assignments that you've created or some ways that you might be able to utilize the sim controls for yourself. Check out those assignments that we've talked about ad nauseum in our previous workshops. See how some of those weekly memos might show up in your AP classes, so on and so forth. Register for, instead of our number 6 instructor controls workshop, what I want you to do is register for that instructor competition, because we're doing it too for the IR sim. It starts on February 9th and runs through April 9th from 6:30 to 9:30 Eastern time. We'll be meeting with teachers who are all playing, and there's a 10% discount on your 2024 Statecraft purchase if you win. So feel free to join that. We'd love to have you. This was a lot of information, so take some time to process it. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But with that, thank you for your time. We do appreciate it. We hope that this helps you engage your students on a higher level and they can have a lot of fun. So thanks so much.